the Honourable Jenny Salasa, Minister of Ethnic Affairs, the Honourable Alfred Naro, MP and Chair of the Israel New Zealand Parliamentary Friendship Group, Professor Paul Hunt, Human Rights Commissioner, councillors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, rabbis, ministers of various religious congregations, Professor Robert Greenberg, Dean of Arts from the University of Auckland, Chaverim. I dedicate this speech tonight to Sabbatai Kortiovsky, Zichron Livracha, from Greece, born 1941, died aged 2 at Treblinka death camp. Thank you, Minister, for your words and support today. It is warmly appreciated. You have now witnessed two aspects of our community, the Hanukkah celebrations we had in December, and now today our memorial service for the victims of the Shoah. We hope your friendship with us continues. I began to write this speech back in February of this year, and I began with the following. As Queen Elizabeth II said back in 1992, this year has been an annus horribilis. Yet this was before Christchurch, before Sri Lanka, and just this weekend before the last day of Pesach at a synagogue in Poway, California. It seems to be going from bad to worse. Our thoughts and support and hands of friendship do go to the Muslim community of New Zealand, and specifically to those affected by what happened in Christchurch on the 15th of March. Unfortunately, global terrorism has now shown that New Zealand is not exempt from this international attack on accepting differences, in accepting diversity, and ultimately accepting freedom of choice. And then last weekend we saw what happened in Sri Lanka. And let's be clear, this was not an attack on Easter worshippers. This was an outright attack on people purely because they were Christian. And this was not a one-off. It was the latest in the continued and sustained attack against Christianity. For example, in France alone in 2018, an average of 2 churches per day were desecrated, and yet we hear next to nothing about these attacks against Christianity. I raise this because, as Jews, we know where this can lead to. We know, we've witnessed, and it's our responsibility to stand in solidarity with our Muslim and Christian cousins to do our bit to make this stop. Enough is enough. As I said, I began to write this speech in February. And when I described the year as being an annus horribilis, it was in reference to the increase we are seeing in global anti-Semitism. That we have seen Jewish MPs and party members hounded out of the UK Labour Party, whilst the leadership has stood by and watched. Jews in Europe scared to go out in public wearing their kippot. We've seen the failed global pressure by the BDS, the Boycott, Disinvestment and Sanctions campaign against Israel, to try and get the Eurovision Song Contest banned from taking place in Tel Aviv, despite the Israeli government agreeing not to host it in Jerusalem. I'd like you to think about that for a minute. Can you imagine New Zealand, or any other country for that matter, being told it cannot host a major event in its capital city? And closer to home, we have seen our own MPs stand in solidarity with groups who want to see the destruction of Israel, and at least one MP falsely accused Israel of genocide. And for those of us actively fighting anti-Semitism and Israel hatred, there is the constant online attacks, comparing Israel to the Nazis, claiming Jews and Zionists are controlling the media, financial institutions and governments. And yes, apparently we're even responsible for the fire in Notre Dame. The Jews are once again the pariah of the nations of the world, and Israel the pariah of the world's nation states. Yet despite that, for those who have been on the receiving end of hatred, it is better out in the open than driven underground. Free speech, as opposed to incitement to violence, should be sacrosanct, lest we follow the example of the Nazis and begin on the slippery slope of banning books, music, speakers, dialogue, or views we simply don't like. Despite the recent rise in global anti-Semitism, it has never gone away. I remember it very well growing up in the 80s and 90s back in London, having the National Front knock on our front door, our house being identified by the mezuzah, standing there with broken glass bottles waiting for us to open the front door, or being told that it was a shame that Hitler didn't finish the job when working in a pub in London. But it feels different at the moment. It seems that it's becoming more normalised, and probably than any time since occupied Nazi Germany. Certainly any time since I can remember. Yet, as we've seen today, even in our darkest moments, we've always had hope, right to the end. Our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers, cousins, our people have always had hope. Even those who gave up believing in God, in Hashem, still knew the importance of trying to cling onto what was before the ghettos, what was before the camps. The thing that has kept us as the Jewish people together for centuries, our spirituality. Making sure that despite the risk, the Hanukkah candles were lit, the matzah was baked and the Seder service of sorts was said on Pesach, or on Kol Nidre, or that Kol Nidre was recited on Yom Kippur. The Nazis failed, and so will the evil we have witnessed in Pittsburgh, in Christchurch, in Sri Lanka, and now California. To our lawmakers and those who have influence, I now turn to you with a plea. Recent surveys in the US, Canada, and Europe, which for those Brexiteers still does include UK, have shown an increase in people disbelieving the Shoah took place. That Auschwitz, assuming that they have heard of it, was a holiday camp. That 6 million Jews were not murdered. The Jews hold too much influence, and so on. Don't let that happen in New Zealand. Make New Zealand an example to the rest of the world. Legislate to have Holocaust education as part of the national curriculum. Make sure the memory of those murdered and those who survived are remembered, so that lessons of hatred are learned. Parents of high school children, pressure your children's schools to sign up to the Holocaust Centre of New Zealand's 1 year an hour campaign. Because as Lord Jonathan Sacks said, what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. It is important to do this. In fact, it is incumbent upon us to do this, so we can undertake the mitzvot of Kiddush Hashem, honouring the sanctity of God, and of Tikkun Olam, making the world a better place. May this year be an annus mirabilis, and may we unite together against hatred. Thank you.